back to Colony, the official podcast. I'm your host, Tara Bennett, a senior producer for SYFY WIRE. So we are talking episode 311, Disposable Heroes, which we have to assume was a title selected by Metalhead co-creator and executive producer Ryan Condal, and just a title tolerated by Wes Tooke.
Barely tolerated.
Yeah, I think all of this is barely tolerated by Wes.
Yeah. I have to say, if you don't get lifetime Metallica tickets from the band, I don't know where else you can go, Ryan, because you've done your due diligence.
I really have. Kirk Hammett is a huge horror fan, apparently, so maybe there's a little crossover. Maybe he's watching somewhere in the tour bus. If so, hello, Kirk.
Just hear the sound of me dying inside over and slowly leaking life
I also
force.
like to imagine that Wes climbs into his car after this and just takes the unlabeled CD. Like he's glued like the Beethoven label, over it, and he just slides it into a CD player and makes sure all the windows are up and drives away, and then you just hear the first notes of Battery coming up.
That's a song.
Yes. Track 1, Master of Puppets.
We're all good. This episode, we're going to talk with our fearless leaders today, but we're also going to have on the podcast our season 3 co-EP and director of this episode, Mr. Tim Southam, and wonderful actor Alex Neustaedter, because they're going to talk about one of the most explosive moments of the episode coming up later on. But let's start with our cold open, because they're always so fun. And in this one, we get a very predatory, X-Files-y, File and Angels vibe with the invisible nemesis knocking off soldiers. It's really great getting to see this and getting to see exactly how potent of an enemy they are.
Yeah, incredible teaser. Really, really proud of the work that Tim did to pull that together and make it, it has the parts of stuff that you've seen before. So with that comes the danger of falling into tropes. And I think Tim crafted this incredibly interesting, suspenseful sequence that also feels grounded and real, and an exploitation of the elements that we've already introduced in the show. There's nothing that's entirely brand new that's coming out of left field at all. Like, we've hinted at different species and the fact that they're enemies of the Raps. And we've been talking about outliers for 2 seasons now, and these special soldiers and the pods and everything, and you're just seeing it all come together here. And we really like the idea of throwing these 2 people that are from foreign lands and so different that they can't even communicate with each other, but then they find the universal sign language of being a military operator, and they communicate through that, and they're able to go through this alien environment. We don't even know, they don't know where they are. Is it some testing facility on a space station? Is it somewhere an unpopulated place of Earth? Is it in the woods of the Pacific Northwest? We don't know.
You want to talk about pressure on a shooting day? It's January in Vancouver. You have like 6 hours of usable light. It's raining because it's been raining for 31 days. And you have to get the whole sequence and make it not feel stock in genre. So for Tim, with a couple cameras in the woods and some soggy actors, and they were fantastic also.
Yeah.
Just amazing.
They had to be stunt players, but they had to speak fluently other languages, which is a somewhat select pool up there. But man, they did a great job.
They did.
Yeah. They were very cold.
But you felt the urgency of it and the danger of it, which was really important to know, oh man, these are the stakes that we're playing with here.
Those space diapers do not provide a lot of warmth.
Yet another man who's quite fit in his space diapers.
Yes.
Yes.
I wish we all could be that fit in our space diapers. Let's talk about the outliers.
The algorithm has a place for all of us.
Do they? Thank God. That's good to know as I drink and eat my candy. With the outliers, we're finding out really in this episode that they're the first line of defense. And while we as audience members have appreciated whatever list Will and Broussard have been on, this is a sobering revelation of exactly why they've been saved, because to a certain degree, they could be cannon fodder. You hope for more, but this is pretty scary in terms of the realization of what being an outlier really means.
Yeah, well, that's the ironic twist, I think, at the end of this, is that, you've built for 2 seasons this idea that these people are special and reserved, and they're protected from encounters with the drones and possibly the military, and that they've been selected because they are very special. They're incredibly elite people as far as it goes with the human population. And then the revelation here is that it looks like they've been very specially selected simply because they're the best first line of D-Day on Normandy, very low survival rate first wave.
Cannon fodder.
Yeah. A little more than cannon fodder, I think.
Space cannon fodder.
Expendable. That's right.
They seem very credibly trained in the beginning in the cold open, and yet they don't last very long. So it's uh-oh.
Because as with everything, we want to accomplish a certain goal. We just don't want to spend a lot of money doing it. Every army since the beginning of time, you've spent all this time and money training us. You've sent us into this foreign land to accomplish a certain goal. Equip us. Give us the equipment that we need to accomplish our goal. That's what's playing out in this sequence, is that you've done all this work, you've gone to the very last step, which would be giving them the equipment they need to give them the leg up. And there's certainly a money and supply thing, but there's also the other thing on the other side. Well, we don't want to make them too powerful because we don't want to make them scary. This is obviously a flashback something that's happening probably before the Bowman's arrival in Seattle. This is in post, I think, Kynes' takeover of the block, but certainly pre all the events that are going on right now. So in theory, this could have led to positive outcomes somewhere else in terms of getting them properly equipped, but we just don't know.
And then we get the big bombing in Seattle. And for that, we talked to director Tim Southam and actor Alex Neustaedter about that sequence. We'll throw to them right now. Tim, for you, there's a lot of challenges. You've got a lot of information about the outliers. You've got a bombing that happens. You've got a tremendous amount of elements that are small in terms of character, but then there's huge in terms of the mythology of the show.
That was an incredibly efficient episode. That script was so tight. I think we landed to the minute in terms of getting what we needed to do done. We landed to the minute in terms of our shooting schedule. We, at that point, had very tired crew and cast and shot, I think, a very civilized schedule. So what I remember from that episode was just how elegant a shoot it was. In terms of the storytelling, the unraveling of all the certainties and some of the expectations around Seattle was a critical part of it. Bram's epiphany happens at several levels. It happens in terms of he's busily transferring his trust to another adult male, his interaction with his mother, his interaction with his father. This all coarsens heavily after episode 9. So we relied heavily on Alex playing Bram to carry that, and he did it brilliantly.
Alex, I wanted to talk about the huge bomb explosion sequence. That being a moment for your character who runs in, who shows who he is and what he thinks as he's developing who he is as a person. Somebody that wants to help and who do good. So tell me a little bit about the setup for that, and as well as what it kind of tells you about where he's going as a character.
I believe he was on a scout or just a casual walk around patrol mission, and then he sees the explosion, and his first instinct is to go straight towards it, which differentiates him versus his buddy at the time. So he just goes straight to it, and he doesn't really know what's going on or what it is. He sees these bodies everywhere, this huge truck explosion, semi, and I personally couldn't imagine what that would feel. I mean, I can imagine, and I did imagine it, but it's quite heart-wrenching, and you're immediately in shock. And to be able to see that and to have lived through that is incredibly difficult, but at the same time, he's seen it a couple times before.
Right.
So he kind of knows how to react in the situation, and he sees someone struggling, and he's trying to put the pieces as best as he can together. And I think that's kind of what he's doing at this point in his life anyway, because so many things have fallen out of his control and fallen away from him, that whatever he can fix in this one moment or day to day is what he's going to try and do.
Yeah, there's a great dramatic irony there for Bram as a character, because this thing that he idealized, the fighting the cause of resistance, obviously the story turns out a little differently as to the cause of this whole thing. But, you know, as he's running onto the scene, I think in his head, he's imagining that this is some act of resistance that's been perpetrated in the Seattle colony. And this is the very thing that he so badly wanted to be a part of as close as a year ago. And now he's gone through all these horrible, life-changing events that have pulled him very far away from that. And he finds himself as somebody on the good side of the law, or the democratic side of the law, as a community patrol officer who's a first responder to this thing. And he's seeing firsthand the human cost of participating in the resistance. And in a season, at least in the second half of the season, The Visit to Seattle, a long story of character reversals and inverting things and turning characters on their head and putting them in the opposite situation where they found themselves before. There's another little moment that just shows how far Bram has come as a character, but also how far the Bowmans have come. And they've gone through all these changes, and now they find themselves in completely different places than they were even, you know, at the start of the season when they were all living in that cabin together.
And you hope that this is the redemptive story also, the Bram story, in the sense that he was someone who's radicalized, who was an initiator of violence, and now is a first responder to it. And that societies that are going to succeed and thrive need people at the center who can hold them together and who are going to fight to make sure that there are places for their sisters and that violence is not the first recourse.
Right.
And it's interesting that Bram, who, as Ryan said, so eagerly sought it out, has now come around through the varieties of traumas that have occurred and is now firmly on the side of the guy running in and trying to clean up someone else's mess, as opposed to being a cause of that mess, which he literally was in seasons 1 and 2.
He blew up a ship.
Yeah, remember that? Way back when?
Wild.
It's like years ago.
I was going to say, there was also the act that you strung together, Tim, with Kynes leaving the building. And the way that you shot that and the entrance and the exits, I thought maybe that's worth talking about.
Right. Then the continuous flow of Kynes discovering that his world's unraveling. So what I really liked about 311 was we had three really contrasting sort of spaces and energies. We had the Bowmans really sort of trapped in rooms with O'Neill at close quarters, trying to sort out huge issues of trust. We obviously have a murder, which happens in a oneer. We watch Snyder go really dark.
Yeah.
Then as a second environment, have Bram circulating the streets and then ending up in a huge explosion where he is shocked by what he's seen. And that's not easy to do with a family that's been through what the Bowmans have been through.
Yeah.
And then as a third sort of tonal shift, we are following and really with Kynes as he realizes that he's being dumped, that there's an effective coup d'etat happening. And we sort of accompany him as he walks through all these environments, realize where the betrayals are coming from, and right out of the building. That flow, which was absolutely fundamental to keeping that episode moving, that was all courtesy of Kynes sort of going through his empire, taking the necessary steps to kind of immunize it against this coup d'etat and then disappearing, all very fluidly. Those three contrasting energies from a directing point of view were really, really fun.
One of the elements of this episode that I really loved is the interaction between Helena and Snyder. And it's really cementing the dynamic shift between them. I love when she wishes for the old Alan, because we've always known that Snyder knows how to read a room, and he certainly knows how to try to play a room. But this is now him ascending to his potential in the darkest way. So tell me a little bit about the fun of being able to always have Helena in this dominant position and having this episode really change that.
The idea of bringing Allie back, we wanted her back so badly on the show, and it's hard to work out these things, and we were able to get her back for a limited run. And as soon as we knew that we could do that, it just became obvious what role she could play, which is she knows him in a way that nobody else has known him, and she kind of gave him his first opportunities. And in some ways, the student has surpassed the master, terrifying, horrifying way. It was just fun to lean into that. Those are the most enjoyable scenes to write, honestly, I think, probably the Snyder Helena stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And the two of them on set, I mean, they're like yin and yang, too. So
it's great. And for Allie, who wasn't around for a lot of the season simply because she was busy on a very successful Fox show that was taking up all of her time, her coming back to set, it was like a college reunion in a way, you know, and like, yeah, everybody loved spending time with her, and she was such an integral part of the show for season 1, season 2. So she would come back, and her and Peter have this like hilarious relationship that very much mirrors, I think, the Helena Snyder. She would always say like, "Oh, I love how you just surround me with short men all the time." Allie's very tall, so it's it's kind of easy to do. But everybody that was always in power next to Allie, she looks like she's like 6'5" because of all the people that we put around her.
She said those little men.
Those little
and the way
men,
she pronounces little just makes it even more little than it would otherwise be.
It's great. It's great. We all enjoy it.
But what I love about that headbutting moment is also you kind of see Snyder's remorse for the person that he has murdered and been replaced by the new Snyder. So she says, sometimes I miss the old Snyder. And he says, well, as I remember, you sent that Snyder to camp.
Yes.
And in that rebuttal and the way he plays it, you can see that he knows what he's lost and that he has crossed a Rubicon. It is very obvious to him. And that's why Peter's such a wonderful actor, that there's a third dimension to that line that is not necessarily there on the page that he's able to find.
It's so true. Snyder doesn't have a lot of friends. And John Hugenacre and his character, to a certain degree, if not a typical confidant, is somebody that is on his side. And so tell me a little bit about developing that, because we saw them in the very beginning of the season as very adversarial. And now we're seeing them as working together, and that adds a whole other dimension to the scenes that they have.
We envisioned this as a season-long arc for this character when we were crafting him in the season premiere. We didn't know exactly how it was going to take form, but this idea of this person that was in this superior kind of antagonistic role with Snyder that then becomes his partner later in the season. And partner is the right word because we've seen Snyder with these types of characters before, with Lagarza in season 1, head of his Gestapo, and Snyder certainly has superiority and command over him. And then with Mac Brandt's character in the prison camp in season 2, it just delighted us. Who was just obviously just a sociopath who'd been
it's just brutal.
Who probably had messed up on the mainland and was then sent out to this facility, sort of like Snyder was, so they kind of shared that. But he was not interested at all in what Snyder had to say. And even though he was technically answering to him, it was sort of the separation of administration and military. So he did not answer to Snyder at all. And that was played out in that. So this, I think, puts that type of character in very even ground with Snyder, where he's kind of the military muscle that's sent along with the political administrator to get a certain job done. And he's probably also the most competent of the characters just in terms of his actual training and background. Like, you get the sense that Garland was a real operator in whatever he used to do in his prior life and has now turned that towards working for the IGA.
And this is another moment where we're asking both the audience and the actors to do a huge jump, which is in the time jump that happens between Snyder leaving Switzerland and showing up in Seattle. Presumably, he and Garland have worked together. They've been in LA. They've developed this past in history. So when Garland walks into that room, we're kind of immediately asking the two of them to establish that relationship really quickly. And then in their working relationship, realize that they have a shorthand. That's challenging for actors, and they did a great job.
But ultimately more interesting storytelling, because it's not interesting to see them come in and reminisce about what we've been doing there for the last 6 months, because they already know that.
They already know that.
You know, it's more interesting for you to fill in the blanks.
And to look at their energy together and to see the begrudging respect.
Oh, and they totally rely on each other.
Totally.
Because they've seen the skill set. They have an important symbiotic relationship. And they're also on an island here in Seattle where if you're not looking out for me and I'm not looking out for you, no one's looking out for us.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. And they trust each other enough that Garland is willing to go and betray an old friend and drag him to that bar, which is a really telling moment also. And the kind of smoothness with which he does it also lets you know that he is on Snyder's wavelength and the ends justify the means.
Yes, they will sell out whatever they need to sell out to get the ends. In this episode, also, we really get an understanding of Project Phoenix, and it is engaged by Kynes, and it's a big game changer. You know, we have spent episodes getting a sense of what Kynes is moving towards, and he makes a call. Like, this is somebody that has known exactly the situation that he's in, is that he can manipulate so much and run Seattle as best as he can, but there's a good chance that you need a plan B. I was really compelled by that moment where he just shuts it all down. That is not only a moment of changing what everybody in Seattle has grown to rely on, which is technology, what a little taste of the old life was. It's also now a completely new chapter for when we move forward about how Kynes is going to operate.
It's an important story point in that you can't have everyone on the grid in Seattle with the occupation coming in and taking it over. He's making them fly blind. He's trying to equalize it. And in a world in which the occupation isn't able to get that grid back up, if you're looking towards the future, everyone kind of gets a fresh start. So these people with pasts that, such as the Bowmans, who are terrified about it all coming out, well, maybe that just all was wiped clean.
Also, it lets you register again how chilling it must be that before Seattle, this is a world where everybody's gone back and reverted to a non-technologically leaning life. Seattle gives that back. Everybody's got phones, everybody's reconnected again, and then when you get rid of that, that's a chilling reminder of exactly how we would react. Half of us, I don't think, would be able to get into our houses again without that.
I mean, they were so reliant. I mean, it's certainly a cautionary tale, I think, for our own lives. It's like they're so reliant on it that it puts them at, a bigger disadvantage than would be the population of, say, Los Angeles, who had become, over the course of a year plus, very accustomed to working in an environment like that, a more analog environment.
Let's also talk about where we are with the Bowmans in this episode. We had certainly talked about the Bram of it all. We're moving towards Katie and Will certainly being in the mode of understanding that they're going to have to make some new choices.
Yeah, the power dynamic within their marriage is also changing in interesting ways. Katie's always been the point person with the resistance.
Yeah.
And that is a role that has been established, and that is suddenly being challenged. Will is suddenly involved in a way he's never been before. He's developed a relationship with Broussard, and Broussard recognizes a fellow professional, and it's putting Katie in an uncomfortable spot, and it's articulated in this moment where the boys decide to go out, and that's fascinating because Katie has been kind of the keeper of the ideological flame, so why is she not there? And that's clearly eating at her in that scene for justifiable reasons, and the last couple of scenes where Broussard goes back and talks to Amy, you realize that she's kind of thinking of similar questions. Is this going to be a boys' club moving forward? What does it mean to be in or out? How is this changing? How is this impacting us? What does a professionalized movement look like? Can I be a part of it? Should I be a part of it?
You know, as we lead into the end of the episode, we get that fascinating moment where Snyder, he's now ascended to getting Seattle and running it. And that is a huge responsibility. It is also being right in the target zone with the IGA, with everything that he's kind of avoided. He's wanted to be middle management to a degree. This is the first time his good work has earned him probably the most dangerous position that he's ever going to have post-occupation.
It's like getting promoted to the showrunner of The Walking Dead. You know, it's an honor that signifies an incredible accomplishment in your career, but the seat is probably still warm with the blood of the last guy that was there.
Yes.
So it's a very precarious...
It's a shelf life job, that's for sure.
Very precarious position that Snyder has been placed in, and many times have been delighted by line reads by Peter Jacobson, but his simple no when he realizes what Helena has crafted for him before she jumps on a plane back to Davos to leave him in charge of this possibly under siege colony. Just great. Yeah. Just great. And I think shows the arc of Snyder's character Because you can imagine, even though we didn't see the scene in season 1 where he ascends to the throne of Los Angeles, just a block there, not in charge of the whole colony the way he is here in Seattle, you can imagine it being the greatest day of the man's life. Like, he can't wait to put on the tailored suit and all that. Whereas this Snyder is the grizzled battle veteran. Like, he knows what comes along with his role, not looking forward to it at all, but has also learned from prior mistakes and probably sets him up to certainly be a much more effective leader. I don't know what that means for the people on the other side of the conflict for him, but certainly a more effective leader than he was in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And there's this deliberate parallel, which is we saw at the end of the teaser with Kynes when Seattle was under siege. He goes and stands in the same window and stares at the same view, and he says he wants to build something beautiful. And then in this moment, Peter walks and stares out the same window and sees the occupation forces rolling in. And you realize that this place is about to fundamentally change and that he's probably not that obsessed with building something beautiful.
Not so much. Self-preservation, and who knows what'll happen from that. But it's a stunning moment, and it's a great way to end the episode. And we will end this podcast on that note as well. So as always, I'd love to thank Ryan and Wes for being able to talk with us. And of course, our guests, Tim Southam and Alex Neustaedter, for their input on this episode as well.
Yeah. Tune in next week for a very special guest.
And as always, I got to give it up for my podcast team, including producer Bartley Taylor, producer-editor Paul Terry, our mixer and master Dave Draper, and for the network studios for being our recording home. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week with the penultimate episode of Season 3 with a special guest. Can't wait to have you back.